This is our final day on this round of talking about equanimity as the last of the seven factors of awakening, or as Bill has referred to them. And I love this phrase, factors of optimal presence. That somehow feels more manageable to me. And I like that phrase. But I circled back around and reviewed how Bill and Susan had started us off on this topic. And I just pulled out what for me were some key points. Bill started us off right away talking about what a challenge equanimity is as a high evolved practice and state of being. High evolved, that sounds rather intimidating. But emphasizing that it's a gradual process. In other words, it's okay to be a slow learner, which was very reassuring. And he points out that practicing equanimity gives us the opportunity to loosen our attachment to deeply ingrained and conditioned habits, the habits of holding on and pushing away, in the face of how do we relate to our constant flow of experience, the sounds, the sight, the smells, the tastes, what's going on in the world. Oh, this is terrible. A thought, a feeling. Oh, anger. Oh, fear. Oh, anxiety. Oh, another thought. And it never stops. It never stops. And in that first week, Susan also emphasized how this is a challenging practice, which of course reminded me, and I've told this story before, of my first individual interview with Susan as part of the meditation and psychotherapy retreat. She responded to my saying my intention was wanting to cultivate equanimity. And she had this very wise, kind look in her face that, oh no, dear, you're not ready for that. 8 or 9 years later, I'm just beginning to understand her wisdom. But back to the points from that first week. Susan also pointed out at the beginning of the month how we don't have many examples of equanimity in our current world on fire, and how in our own lives, most of us will wobble in and out of reactivity and balance all day long, in and out of destabilizing mind states, and constantly moving to readjust. She suggested that we give ourselves permission to make mistakes, to not have to do this perfectly. And we inevitably will make mistakes. It's part of our nature. And even more than that, she says it's important to make these mistakes so we can learn from them by noticing our reactivity, by being willing to look at our shadowy, unskillful places of limitation where we get out of balance and stability. And we can recognize signs in the body, in the breath, in our attitude of heart and quality of tension when we are out of balance, tilting too far one way or the other, away from even-mindedness and even-heartedness. This gives us the chance to play around with restoring balance and building up the skills to stay in the vicinity of equanimity. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly had days this month when I see what is going on in the world, when I've had a difficult discussion and been angry with a loved one, when I'm worried about a family member who's ill, when equanimity has seemed pretty inaccessible. Indeed, any beneficial feelings seem pretty remote as I felt tossed by the waves of hindrances and the winds of shame and blame. I seemed at a loss of how to hold the pain I was feeling in balance without getting hooked by it or trying to push it away. In trying to sit with what I was feeling, I realized trying to hold it all was just too much for me in that moment. I could acknowledge mistakes I had made out of my reactivity, my anger, and my fear, and notice the imbalance. I could notice my aching heart, my churning stomach, my tight breathing. But none of my standard go-tos were working to ease my distress and help me restabilize. My concentration was sketchy and wavering like a bad internet connection. And even in my compassion practice and metta practice, my walking meditation, I could feel the tug towards wobbling into shutting down or lashing out. Rather than continuing to try to restabilize in this heart of this hindrance storm, which felt like trying to walk a balance beam in the middle of a tornado, I realized I could just notice the signs of being out of balance and begin slowly readjusting with something easy and more simple and something that felt possible to do to begin reestablishing some balance. And that didn't mean that I just forget about the suffering of the world, or my personal conflicts and concerns. It just meant that I could set them aside for the moment, just not now, and just accept them as they are. I remembered the wisdom of metta practice, of beginning with the easiest beings to practice balanced love and caring. So rather than starting with holding the person I was angry with, or the person I was worried about, or the world I was overwhelmed by, maybe I could just start with my kittens, who I love dearly, who automatically bring some uplifting energy, some joy and comfort, but who also present an opportunity to practice being a bit more even-hearted, as I also saw clearly that I really do care for one a bit more than the other. Yes, don't tell them I do have a favorite. My kittens, as you've heard about probably before in my talks, are Yuki and Kiko. And Yuki has been my favorite, as I more clearly and honestly recognize this bias, this mistake, this limitation. I could feel into how my heart was just a bit more open and a bit more joyful when it was Yuki sitting in my lap or snuggling with me in bed. How I might be a little less gentle removing Kiko from the kitchen counter than Yuki. How my voice might be a bit more warm and welcoming when I greeted Yuki. And I also felt in that moment a deep sadness at how this bias may have been experienced by Kiko. And my heart burst open. So I'm practicing more even-heartedness to both my kittens. I've been practicing responding to Kiko with just as much affection and care as I do Yuki. Not loving Yuki less, but loving both equally much. And indeed, it seems to increase my capacity for loving both of them. And as I thought about sharing this kitten equanimity practice, I wondered if it would seem too trivial an example. But in thinking about it and talking about it with Catherine, I came to realize that nothing is too small or trivial in our practice, and that this part is equanimity as well, to hold equally what can seem to be mundane and inconsequential part of life, The same is with those events and experience that we're conditioned to label as more important and significant. Just as Catherine spoke about not having to put ourselves or others in the good box or the bad box, we don't have to put our experiences in the important or unimportant box. It truly all matters. It truly all is great learning. This kitten practice continues to be a very rich practice for me in noticing how imbalance feels in small and subtle ways, how bias feels in small and subtle ways. These noticings are manageable, and I can learn from them. My kitten practice has brought me much joy and has opened up the door of equanimity in my heart, mind, body, breathing. It has given me the necessary uplift and energy to continue learning from my limitations and my mistakes, and be patient with being a slow learner, sustaining me through the weebles and wobbles of my practice. So I give myself permission to be a slow learner and make mistakes necessary to see my unskillful behavior. I give myself permission to not be heroic, to start where I am just as I am, even in, or perhaps especially in, small ways as I explore and cultivate equanimity. In helping me to rebalance and feel into accessing mindfulness, calmness, joy, and energy, it has then allowed me to hold more in my restabilized field of equanimity, to bring more kindness and compassion to myself and others, opening the doors of my heart mind to air out the fears and anger, aversion, and clinging, and to be more fully present to myself, to those in my life, and to the world. Thank you so much for your kind and generous attention. Thank you, thank you. So let's reorient and settle into our practice. Oh, shaking out, letting go, releasing what's not necessary. Finding what brings a bit more comfort and ease into these hardworking bodies. Perhaps paying some attention to those common places where tightness accumulates. Neck, shoulders, slowly rebalancing the body, moving left and right, forward and back, feeling into a more balanced, stabilized posture. Top to bottom, inside and out. And if this is comfortable for you, closing the eyes or gentle gaze with kind eyes. Inviting the mind in from all the external considerations to just resting in body breathing. Following whatever your flow of breathing is like, honoring that, and inviting the breath into its own most easeful rhythm and pace. Letting the heart and mind find a comforting, soothing place to rest. Slowing down just a bit more. Dropping into some quiet and kind, generous stillness. And just practicing perhaps a bit of patience and generous acceptance with your process for settling in and settling down. To be with open-hearted, even-hearted, caring attention. Wherever the mind has wandered, just invite it back to a place where it's easy to be a bit quieter, a bit calmer, a bit more concentrated. And wherever the heart has retreated, invite it into a place where it is safe to be a bit more open, a bit more warm and even-hearted. May I continue to benefit from all the experiences of my life, whether skillful or unskillful, to cultivate even-heartedness and even-mindedness. May I appreciate and learn from all the experiences of my life, no matter what size or shape package they arrive in.